In this lesson, students will be able to accurately measure items to the quarter, half, and 3/4 inch. You will want to begin by having your child make comparisons about how their ruler is like a number line. In fact, let's draw a number line below our ruler to compare. If I mark the whole numbers on my number line, I can see that they are marked in equal intervals. But what would this mark be before the 1? It must be a 0. Now what about the marks between the numbers? This one looks like it is halfway between the 0 and 1. When I mark it on my number line, it partitions the space into 2 equal pieces, so that I know this mark must represent 1/2 of an inch. Now look between the 1 and 2. Can you find the half mark? Let's transfer it to our number line below. Now I know that it can't be labeled 1/2 because this is 1/2 and this distance is not the same. So as we look at it, I see that it is past the 1 inch mark, another 1/2 an inch, so I would label this 1 1/2. Help your child to see the pattern as they continue to label the halves between the whole numbers. The first one would be 1/4. The next is 2/4 and is equal to 1/2, so I will leave it labeled as such, and the third mark represents 3/4. Looking past the 1 inch mark, what is this mark? Your child might want to label it 1/4 as well. However, help them to see that it is past the 1 inch mark, another 1/4 of an inch, so it would be 1 1/4. The next mark would be 1 2/4 and is equivalent to 1 1/2, so we will leave it labeled that way. The next mark is past the 1 another 3/4 of an inch, so it would be labeled 1 3/4. Ask your child if they notice any patterns and continue labeling the number line in fourths. They should begin to see that the first mark past any whole number is another 1/4, the second mark is 1/2, and the third mark is 3/4. Once your child understands the marks on a ruler, they are ready to measure. Show your child how to line up an object with the 0 mark. Sometimes the 0 mark is right at the end of the ruler, like this one, but sometimes it's not, like the one on our previous example. Help your child understand the importance of correctly lining up an object with the 0 mark so they can measure accurately. Every fraction of an inch makes a difference. So let's measure my pen. With one end of my pen lined up with the 0 mark, have your child note where it ends. They will need to find the line that is closest to the end of the object. It may not touch exactly one of the marks, so they will need to use their judgment of which line is closest. Then you'll want to begin reading the whole inches first. For example, here the pen is at least 5 inches long. It goes past the 5 inch mark and is close to the 3/4 inch mark, so I can tell that it is about 5 3/4 inches long. Let's try another object. This time, let's measure a paper clip. First, line up the paper clip with the 0 mark and note where it ends. Remember, we're looking for the line that is closest to the end of the object. Then read the whole inches first. The paper clip goes past the 1 inch mark to the 1 1/4 inch mark, so I know the paper clip is about 1 1/4 inches long. Finally, let's measure our key. First, I'm going to line up the key with the 0 mark and note where the object ends on my ruler and find the line it is closest to. I'm going to read the whole inches first, so this one is about 3 inches, and it's closer to the 3 inch mark than the 3 1/4 inch mark, so I'm going to say that this key is 3 inches long. Have your child practice measuring the length of a variety of objects. Remind them to pay special attention to lining objects up with the 0 mark and reading to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. Today, our goal was to be able to accurately measure items to the nearest 1/4 inch. We did this by first comparing the ruler to a number line to help students become familiar with what each of the marks on the ruler represented. Then, to measure the object, we lined an object up with the 0 mark and first read the measurement to the nearest inch. We then read the 1/4 inches and recorded our answer.